In this presentation, we will generate, analyze, export to Excel, and organize our financial statement reports after entering data for the first month of operations for our new business, that being a profit and loss or income statement report, a balance sheet report, and a transaction report by date within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We entered a month worth of information, and now we get to generate those financial statements, the end product of entering the reports. QuickBooks now has the data and will compile that into the reports for us that we can then analyze and make decisions on. Before we do so, note, however, that we haven't done a bank reconciliation and will do a bank reconciliation. Highly recommend doing bank reconciliations. However, we're going to enter the 2 months worth of data, and we want to put the bank reconciliations side by side so we can then see how the first month bank reconciliation will relate to the second month in the same section. In other words, the problems of the bank reconciliation for the first month can differ than the second month, and we want to put them side by side so we can make that comparison in another section. To generate the reports and the financial statements, we're going to go to the reports on the left side, and we are then going to create our balance sheet report. So let's start with that balance sheet. It should be a favorite report at this time. We're going to go up top, and we can change it just for the month of January this time. So let's go from 01/01/19 to 01/31/19. So that's going to be January 1st to January 31st, 2019, and run that report. If you've been working along with the problem with us, we can compare ourselves to the balance sheet. Note what we will do from a comparison standpoint is look at the balance sheet first. That's going to be the overview. That's where we are at some point in time. Probably the first report we want to look to see how we're doing, to see if there's any corrections to the data input. One of the things we can do in order to audit ourselves from month to month and kind of check our numbers is to go through the balance sheet reports, start there, check the balance sheet reports, check to see if the checking account looks proper. How? We're going to do a bank reconciliation for it. We'll see how to do that at a later time. Check to see if the accounts receivable looks correct. How? We can then compare it to the money that people owe us in the subsidiary account. In other words, we could run an accounts receivable, a customer report by customer to see if those people actually owe us that money. Double check that to see if it looks correct. Note that if we do that for the checking account and the accounts receivable, just those two, then we have a good idea of the income statement accounts, because the other side of these accounts often are income statement accounts. The checking account, if the checking account is right, we're also giving some verification to the cash that has been received, which eventually hits the income statement in the form of hopefully sales mainly, and the expenses that typically hit the income statement in the form of expenses. So by checking the balance sheet accounts, we give some indirect check of the profit and loss, and therefore these balance sheet accounts are really the ones that it's most easy for us to go in and verify through some type of external form in some way. The checking account, we actually have the bank statement. The accounts receivable, we can verify that those accounts are correct by looking at what it's consisting of, who we owe. If we look at inventory, we can actually count our inventory and see if this is reasonable. Prepaid insurance, we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about adjusting entries and how to do this adjusting entry for prepaid insurance. Again, I want to group that together in one section, so we'll do that at a later time. We'll look at those adjusting entries, but we can verify what is still owed. Is our policy still good? Is it still valid? Is it still an asset and not an expense? Short-term investments, we can check that, of course, to our investments, our stocks and bonds that we might have, whatever investment we have. We've got the undeposited funds. We can check that. Do we have $300 on us right now that we need to go to the bank with and put it into the checking account? All these are verifiable type of accounts, and typically more verifiable or easy to verify than the income statement accounts. And as we do so, we're giving some verification, some check to the profit and loss or income statement, because it's often the other side at some point of the cycle. It's the balancing of the accounts. Then we're going to go back down, furniture and fixture. Same concept. There shouldn't be much detail in there, so we should be able to check that fairly easily. That gives us our total assets. We know that, of course, the total assets are equivalent to the liabilities and equity. That's what's being in balance. QuickBooks will not allow us to be out of balance. So, I mean, that has to happen unless something really funny happens. We have to basically tell QuickBooks, don't be in balance, or let us do something that's weird to put us out of balance. So we'll always be in balance there. Accounts payable, we don't have any, but if we did have some, we can check that by determining if the balance is right, looking at who we owe, the vendors that we owe, and double checking that number. The credit card payment, we owe the credit card. Again, we have the statement. Does it match what's on the statement? We can check that. If it does, then good. If it doesn't, we can fix it. As we fix that, we will probably be fixing part of the income statement or profit and loss as well. Taxes payable. This is something we'll verify by basically just checking that we are having the right tax applied to the right types of sales, to the inventory sales in our case. Payroll liability, again, these two things are a little bit more difficult to check because taxes are confusing. Taxes kind of muddy the waters. But the payroll tax, of course, is the tax that we owe based on payroll. And if we're not confident with that, hopefully we have help with the payroll to give us some support to make sure that we are tracking this payroll taxes as we should and paying the proper payroll taxes. And then we've got the loan payable. Again, we could check this. We have the loan statements. We probably, if we pay it every month, we get the loan statements. We'll talk more about that at a later time. And then the equity is something that most people can't check as well because many people don't really fully understand equity, but we can understand it from at least the standpoint of it equals assets minus liabilities. It's the net value. In other words, total equity here is our net worth. In other words, if we were to sell everything, all the assets, and got the amount of cash that they're on the books for, pay off all the liabilities that they're on the books for, then we theoretically would walk away with the total equity amount. So that's in theory, of course. That would mean that we'd have to sell everything for what it's on the books for, such as our equipment and whatnot. But that's one thought to one way you can look at equity. It's kind of like the book value of the company. It's broken out in our case to the investments that we put into the company, the retained earnings, the accumulation of income minus what we took out, the accumulation minus the draws or minus dividends if it's a corporation, and QuickBooks breaks out the net income, the earnings for the particular period, which in our case would be the month or year of January. So if your numbers match these numbers and you're working through this problem, that's going to be one verification. If you're in practice, and of course you're not doing a practice problem, then how do you get that verification just as we did? We get as much external verification as we can on those balance sheet accounts. If your numbers do not match these numbers, that's okay. There's a couple things we can do. One, you can go through those accounts. You can use the quick zoom and go back into the detail to see the detail, although you can't see the detail here because obviously I don't know exactly where everybody would be off at. But two, we're going to look at a transaction list by date, and that'll give us the detail by date for the entire month. If you match all the numbers up to that report, then we should be in balance. We should be okay. So that's the report that we'll really be able to tie out and see what's happening. That's a great report for like grading or looking at the overall detail of what's happened during a time period. The other thing you might want to check is to change the date range. If you're off somewhere, then change this to a prior date and change the future date out. And then go through and see if that account that was off has changed. If it has, go into that detail because there's a date issue with it. You can always go back in and use the quick zoom to go in and change the dates because QuickBooks allows you to do that. So now we're going to go up and we're going to print this report. So we're going to do our normal customization up top. We'll go to customize. We're going to go to the footer, header and footer. We're going to remove the date prepared, time prepared, and report basis. Then we're going to go up top and we're going to remove the pennies, no cents. We're going to make it bracketed numbers and we're going to show red. So that's going to be our items. We'll run that report. Then I'm going to customize this report so that we can see it again. It will be customized and formatted for us. So we're going to save the customization, I should say. We'll save the customization and we're going to put that, I'm going to call it My Reports. And I'm going to add that group, My Reports, add the group. New group, add the group, and then we'll save that. So this will be the balance sheet. We could have put custom balance sheet or something like that, but that should work. And then we'll go to the reports down below just to see if this did indeed save in the customized reports. We're going to go to the custom reports. There it is. It's under My Reports. We want to open that balance sheet and it should then be formatted the way we want it. Now we'll go ahead and print this. We're going to do this a couple different ways. We'll print it as the PDF. Save it. Note that formatting this information is presentation as important as anything else. So we're going to print it first. We're going to print it to the Qt PDF printer. It's in portrait format. That looks good. We're going to print it. We're going to use the Qt PDF printer. That's the one we want. We will then select the print up top. We'll select the drop down. I'm going to go to the desktop. We're going to put it into the GGG folder. Going to organize this into section 7. Within section 7, I'm going to put this as the report. I'm going to scroll down and say this is the balance sheet for 01/31/19 and save that. Going to close this back out. Then we'll do the profit or to export to Excel, selecting the drop down Excel. Same item, we'll open up the Excel document. This is in Google Chrome. Here it is, it looks good. I go to the page layout view and just double check that it looks good. It's all on a page. Back to the normal view, I'm just gonna save this. I'm gonna go to File. We'll go to Save As. We're gonna go to the Browse. We'll put it up top to the desktop. We're looking for that GGG folder. I'm gonna put it in section 7. And once again, I'm gonna say this is the balance sheet, but it's not a PDF file, so I'll remove the PDF, and there we have it. We'll save that item. Closing this back out, we're then going to go to the profit and loss. I'm going to do that by opening up another sheet. So we'll right-click on the sheet up top, duplicate it. I'm going to pull the second tab to the right, so we're going to work on and open the new profit and loss on this tab to the right. So I'm going to go back down to the reports. We will then go to the standard tab. Make sure you're in the standard tab rather than the custom reports, and go to the profit and loss. Opening up the profit and loss, changing the dates just for the month of January 01/01/19 to 01/31/19, January 1st to the 31st, 2019, and run that report. So here is our report. The profit and loss is, of course, the income minus the expenses. We just have a few stops along the way. This is our income, 2 income accounts, income from selling inventory, income from the service items. This is our performance over time. This is how we've done. This is a performance report. Cost of goods sold, that being the guitars that we sell. And then we have the expenses, other type of normal expenses, office, payroll, telephone, utilities. That gives us our total expenses and the net operating income, which at this time is a loss. That's not unusual for the first month of operations for a new business. That loss, that 6112, we will see if we go back to the balance sheet tab, scrolling down, QuickBooks will include here the 6222. Of course, here it has been rounded and we have the red numbers for the negative numbers. So we're going to go back to the profit and loss report. If you're working through this problem and your balance sheet was off somewhere, it's most likely that your income statement or profit and loss is also off somewhere. You can compare your profit and loss to these numbers. In practice, of course, we would start by checking off the balance sheet items and then go in and do further verification with the income items, possibly comparing it to prior years or other industries and looking for unusual type of balances within the income statement or profit and loss statement. If you are off in this report, we're going to do the next report, the transaction list, and that's where we can really find those problems within a setting like this. That's where we can compare our transactions and look to fix them. So we're going to go up top and do the same process. We'll customize this report. We're going to go to the header and footer tab, remove the date, time, and report basis. Scroll back up top, remove the pennies. We're going to make the negative numbers bracketed and show them as red, and then run that report as we have done in the past. There it is. Now we have that loss really glaring at us now. And so we can then print this report up top. We'll print it. And well, first let's save it. So I'm going to close this and we'll save and customize. You may want to call it an income statement as well, if that's something that you would prefer. I'll keep it as a profit and loss here. So we're going to save and customize. We're going to put it into the My Reports section and save that report. We can check that it went there by going to the reports down below. We can go to the Customize Reports, Profit and Loss that we just saved. It should open right up. There it is. Now we're going to go and print it. Printing. We're going to print it. It looks good. Print. We'll use the Qt PDF printer as we have in the past. We'll print that item. It's already going to the folder we want because we just used the last folder, so I'll keep it there. We're going to call it, I'm just going to call it a P and L for 01/31/19. and save that report. Now we'll export it. I'll close this back out. We're going to go to the drop down and export to Excel. Same process, opening it up. This is once again in Chrome. Here is our report. Looks like it all fits on the page. So we're going to go ahead and save this. File tab, save report, format that report. We're going to browse, scroll up top, desktop. We're going to go to the GGG folder, section 7, and we want to put it in as a P&L report for January. It's not a PDF, however. And save that report. Closing this back out, now we're going to go to the transaction detail. To do that, we'll make another tab, right-click on the tab up top and duplicate. And then within this tab, we'll make another report. So we'll go to the reports down below, and we're going to go to the standard reports. And if we want to see the section that it will be in, we could search for it. It's called a transaction list by date. But if you scroll down, I'm going to expand this one. It's in for my accountant, the transaction list by date. So here it is, transaction list by date. We'll select that item. We're going to change the date range up top from 01/01/19 to 01/31/19. So January through January 31st, the 1st through the 31st of January, and run that report. And here we have the detail. So this is kind of like a GL, but rather than the GL be broken out by account and then showing the detail by account, meaning the general ledger or the transaction detail for QuickBooks, this is showing all the detail by date. So it's in order by date. We have the transaction type, we have the number, we have the posting, we have the name, and we have any memos that we have. We have the other side of the account. So it's going to give us basically the account and the split to it. There's at least 2 accounts, remember, with each transaction, and some of them, including payroll, has more than that included in it. So if you go through these transactions, then you can go line by line through these transactions and test them out. So you can basically test the names and go line by line through these transactions. If all these transactions are recorded, you should be good. If they're in some kind of different order, especially if they have the same date here, but they're just in a different order, that's okay. You should still be good. If you have a completely different date, but it's still in January, it's probably still okay, and you should still be good. The report should be in the same time period, and therefore the balance sheet and income statement should be the same. If, however, you are not seeing something that is on this report that is if you see something on this report not on your report, then what you want to do is go up top and change the date range to something prior and something past this date, and see if something reappears or appears. Then go through the dates down below and see if there's something in a date other than January, and if that is the problem. It shouldn't be. We had some beginning balances in 2018, so if you have something in 2018, that's okay if it's the beginning balances, but if there's anything other than what we had prior, then it could be an issue. Or if you see something that should be on the January data that's in there, then that's an issue. Anything after January is quite possible because you're probably working this problem sometime in the future, entered it as the current date, and therefore it went in there as some current date. Wouldn't be a problem if you were working real time in a problem, because the current date would be always correct. You're always working in the real time, hopefully. And then if we go to the right, I'll show the balances, so you can take a look at these balances. Again, if you match up these balances, just tick and tie off the balances. If they're a little out of order, that's okay, but you can tick and tie off the balances as we go. If anything is off, then you can check the account and the split. These also should be the same. This is really the basics of it. If you can tie out all these numbers, the date doesn't matter as much as long as it's within this period and you have these 2 accounts tied out. So if you go through these items line by line, just tick and tying them off, tedious work, but not difficult work, then you could scroll down and you can find all these items. Now, if there's something different, if you have a different dollar amount, then of course, say this item was different, you can just zoom into it. You can go into it, look at the detail of it. It's typically going to be a form of some kind. And if you need to change the number, you can change the number. In a practice problem like this, you want to be careful of doing that in practice, however. If you close this back out, then you have that item here. Note also the transaction types. These are the type of forms that QuickBooks uses to enter the data. We may have used these forms to enter the data, or we may have, for example, entered it directly into a register, or something like that. QuickBooks will choose the appropriate form for QuickBooks, what QuickBooks believes to be the appropriate form to create whatever transaction, no matter how we entered it into the system. In other words, even if we used a register to enter it into the system, QuickBooks will default to whatever it believes is the appropriate form. So I'll scroll through this one more time. Remember, this and this, these three columns are the main three accounts if you're taking and tying this off. And now we're going to go ahead and run this report as well. We'll do the same kind of process for this report. We'll scroll up top. We're going to go to the Customize report. We will go to the header and footer. We're going to remove the date prepared and time prepared. We're going to scroll back up and we're going to make it no pennies. We're going to make bracketed negative and red numbers as we have for all the others. Run that report. We'll scroll up and customize or save the customization. Save the customization. We're going to put that into My Reports and save. Double check that it did indeed go there by going to the reports on the left. Custom reports. There's the transaction list by date. Opening that up. And now let's go ahead and print it. So we'll go up top to the printer. We're going to print it portrait. We will print that item. And then up top, we're going to print this item. Now note, it is fitting on one page. It's kind of squeezing it on one page, however. So it made it a lot smaller in order to do so. And so this is one of those reports that it had to do this, and it did automatically. It fit it. So we probably might want to do something different. I'm going to cancel this and say, let's try going to landscape and see if that looks a little better. And then we can go to print. And so if we're grouping our reports, then we're going to have to group this and staple this in a different way or something like that. But it's probably better than squishing them all together on one page. So now if we go down and see, it still fitted to one page, but it only had to go down to 90. If we want to keep all the font the same, we got to get this back up to 100 and we can change the columns. We won't do that. We'll keep it here. So we'll go ahead and print this. It's already going where we want on the PDF printer. So I'm going to say this is a transaction list by date. And it's going to be 01.31.19. And I'll go ahead and copy this time. Right click and copy so we get it for the Excel. Save it. Close this back out. Export it to Excel. So we'll open up Excel. There's our report in Chrome. Here it is. So there's our report. I'm going to go ahead to the second tab again because this is one that's not going to fit on a page. Notice it's landscape. It's a mess. So I'm going to go back to the normal view. We can't really print it like that. So if we were to print this, then we could try to go to the page layout tab, page layout orientation, landscape. That puts the print over here. That's a little better. Then we can go through and save columns or possibly delete columns. I'm going to go ahead and force it to print to a page, however, by going to the File tab, going to Print, and then we'll do a similar kind of function with the scaling down here and print it, fit all columns to one page. So I'm going to fit the columns and that'll make it smaller if we needed to print it in that format. So there we have that. I'm going to go ahead and save it, File, Save As, and we will browse. Scrolling up, we're going to go to the desktop. We want to look for that GGG file. We're going to go to section 7, and then the amount, it's going to be, or the title, transaction list by date once again, and save. Now we're just going to organize our reports so we can present them. So if we open this back up, this is where all our reports are for section 7. And so here's all of our reports. We're mainly looking at those financial statements at this point. How can we present these financial statements to somebody else? We could put the 3 tabs on an email or something like that. Or we can zip the file. If we had to give this whole file to somebody, we could right click on this file and send to a zipped file, not just to compress it so it will fit in an email in terms of the data, but also so we can attach just one file. Or we can go in here and we could try to make one document with it, either an Excel document or a PDF document with all the forms we need. So let's look at that now. We're just going to look at the financial statements. To do that, I'm going to open up another Excel sheet. So here is another Excel sheet. And we're going to populate this Excel sheet with our major forms, which will start with the balance sheet. So we'll go back in here and open our balance sheet back up. So open up that balance sheet. I'm going to copy the whole thing with Control A or selecting this triangle, right click on it, copy, go back to our new tab, our new sheet, right click and paste. I'm going to go back to the balance sheet to copy the tab name. So we'll go back to the balance sheet, double click on the balance sheet. I'm holding down Control C to copy it. Click off of it, going back to the other tab, double clicking on the sheet's name, Control V to paste it. There's that. I'm going to add another sheet now, and we'll do the same for the profit and loss. Back to our information, opening up the profit and loss report. Same process, we'll select the triangle, the whole thing, and right click and copy. Back to our tab, make sure you're in A1, right click and paste it, the whole thing. Then I'm going to copy the sheet name. We're going to go back to our profit and loss, double click the sheet name, right click or Control C, back to our sheet, double click the sheet name, Control V to paste. And then one more time, we'll add one more report. This one's already open for me. Here's the report. Here's the transaction list by date. Selecting the whole thing, Control A or triangle, right click and copy. We're then going to go back to our sheet, right click and paste in A1. And then go back to our transaction list and double click on the name, right click or just Control C, back to our transaction list, double click, right click, Control V, transaction list. So now we have our three tabs. We can give this to someone in one report. Here's our balance sheet, profit and loss, and income statement, or we can export this to a PDF now by going to the File tab and saying Print, and then printing it to a PDF printer and making it not just one sheet, not the active sheet, but the entire workbook. And we can then say, okay, here is our balance sheet, here is our profit and loss, here is our transaction report. Now the transaction list is a problem here because it's not fitting on a page. If we then go to the transaction report, then we can go to the transaction report, page layout view. We can then make it the orientation landscape. We can try to go back to the printing, print to a page. And if we just select this active sheet and try to scale it individually by fitting to one column, then now that fits to one column. If we then do the entire sheet, then print the entire workbook, we can see how it'll print over here. Here's the balance sheet. It has 2 pages. Here's the profit and loss, and here is our transaction list. If we then print that as a PDF, it'll print in a similar format so that we can then attach one PDF with those reports. You don't want it all broken up. That's the presentation is important. So then we'll go back over here and we'll just save this. We'll save as. We'll browse. We're going to go up to the desktop. We're going to go to the GGG file, section 7. And I'm just going to call this section 7 reports. Probably could call it financial statements for January 2019 typically, but we'll keep it with that and save that. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.